All right. Good morning. Um, I think I've got everything set up and ready to roll. I'm going to start off addressing some of the Procreate stuff for those of you who are on the iPad. So this application here, let me move my mouse over. This is Let's View. Let's View lets you take what's on your iPad and project it onto your laptop. So that's how I show you what's happening on my iPad at the same time. So I'm in Procreate, um, and I think what I wanted to talk about just to kind of start off with is how do you save a file once you're done with it in Photoshop? Because as I went through, I did get a lot of grading done last night. So anything that was submitted before like 8 o'clock last night was graded. If you turn it in later than that, I will grade it today. Um, but I haven't gotten to today's stuff yet. Um, so what I wanted to do is maybe just mess around with this a little bit. This looks a little bit like our second project. And just to kind of show you how could I go through and save this so that it's the right file format and what I save ends up being something that I can see when you go to send it, even though it's Procreate, because a lot of people were able to send movies but didn't send a Photoshop document. Okay, so I'm going to mess with this just a little bit. What I think I'm going to do is maybe just add a few values or colors to this so that it seems maybe a little bit more like what that value dome looks like. So I'm going to add a couple like middle values to a couple spots. Some of these shapes are closed off so they don't like completely close out. Others are not. So let's get a little bit of a lighter value. So I'm tapping the circle in the corner, which is my color picker. I just want a lighter gray for some of this, and then a darker gray for some of it. I'm not really painting here. I'm just dropping color. So this is like using a color, like a paint bucket in Photoshop. And I could get a really dark color also to do shadows. That's too dark. I don't like that. Get a little lighter than that. Undo. Oh, it wants to connect that because it's too similar to the color of the line. So it wants to connect it. So I'm going to go undo, undo. There we go. That's what I wanted. Do like the lips face down so they're a little bit darker. Whoops, undo. Bottom of the nose. I'm not going to even completely finish this. I just wanted to put some values, like let's pretend like this is a finished piece, even though it is clearly not that. So say I was happy with this, and this is what I wanted to send to my teacher. I'm done. The values are there. It's painted. Um, this is not painting that second project or second exercise the right way. If you've watched the videos, it's done very differently than this. We'll talk about that today. But I'm going to just make it a little bit smaller, and I want to save out this video, or this, I could save out the video and save out the file. So if we click on the wrench up here at the top left, right next to gallery, those are our actions. And in the actions is our ability to share our image. So under share image, the first one it has there is Procreate. So if I were to send a Procreate image, that would be great. I'm asking you not to send Procreate image because I can't view that file on my computer. And grading on my computer is way easier than trying to grade on my iPad. The iPad is easy in a lot of ways, but not for Blackboard and grading. So I can't look at the file, and that file doesn't work inside of Blackboard, but a Photoshop document does. So right under Procreate, there's something that says PSD. That is Photoshop document, okay? So that is the type of file that I want you to save. So I'll tap on that, and it says exporting. And notice that it says untitled artwork. It's going to save it there. It's going to export it like that because we didn't name what our file was called. You can always go back and rename it when you send it with your computer or your phone, or you can just get out and you can actually name this piece before you start to send it. It's going to save it as a Photoshop document. It says that right under the name, and then it has a little thumbnail and it tells you how big the file is. Photoshop documents are a little bit bigger, so you need to make sure that you know where you're saving it, where you're putting it. Are you going to put it in your files on your iPad? Are you going to share it with the drive up above, like in a cloud drive, like Google? Normally, that's what I would do. I would probably do that. You could use Dropbox. But usually I'm going to either just save it on my iPad in the files, or you can mail it to me if you have that set up. But I prefer that you're dropping it in Blackboard, because if you email it to me, then I have to save it. Then I have to go through and take it and put it back into Blackboard. It's a lot of work for me. So I'd rather you just connect it. So I'm going to use Drive here. So right now it's hooked up to my Jed Kimball MVCC folder. I don't want it there. If I tap academics, then down there I can find my class. So I have folders for all my different classes. I'm going to tap on digital painting. I'm pretending like this is part of the second project, the second exercise, the value dome. So I would tap on that. So now I'm in the right folder, and I would just say save here. And this is also a place where you can change the name. All right. So we would do FA 210. Then we go underscore. Let's say Kimball demo underscore. And then this is exercise 2. Then I might put B for bonus. This is would be a bonus image for that. If I'm happy with that, I hit return. Now I've got my file name. It looks right. And then I can just hit upload. And it will take that, send it to my Google Cloud. And then what you can do is you can go through and turn that in Blackboard. I would do that right now, but for me, that's kind of tricky, only because I don't want to set up. I still haven't. I should, in between classes, go in and log in to my Blackboard on my iPad. But to do that while we're here in class is just like a lot of work. And my phone goes off and I've got to put in the code and authenticate to get all that stuff. So I'm not going to do that just now. The other thing I want to do is I want to undo all this, because I want to save this out without all these values in there. So I'm going to leave it like that. I didn't want those there. So that's how you would save that. Other things that we could have done is like the video. You can watch a time-lapse replay. So you can see how I went through and traced this 3D render to get this image. So no, I didn't make it up out of my head. And you can see how we added all the value and then we undid it. It's a sped up movie. When you go to hit save, if you want to hit that second one where it says export time lapse video, you get to choose whether it's a 30-second or the full time. Um, it's up to you. If you want to share that with me, I'm always happy to get that, because that not only shows me your final product, but it also shows me your picture together. So in some of the grading, I was able to comment on that a little bit because you saved it out as a movie as well. So those are just some things under actions. Some of the other things that I often use under actions, I will mess around with the canvas. I might use a drawing guide. So right now it's on just a grid. That's all that it is, but you can tap on edit drawing guide. So it's creating a 2D grid. You could add an isometric grid. What that also does is it tries to snap some of your lines to that grid. You could do the same thing with perspective, and you can just choose how many vanishing points you want, where they go. One that I often will use is the symmetry. So if with symmetry, let's say we've got it here right now, anything that I draw on the left side of this picture is also done on the right side. And you also have options. So this one's a vertical symmetry. You could do horizontal. You could do a quadrant. So that means anything that happens in one quadrant happens in another. Or you can do radial, which is essentially 8. So let's say I like that and I hit done. Let's get a new layer. So we're on a layer. I'm going to actually go above this one. We'll make this one disappear. And then we have to just tap on the layer, and then we have to click Drawing Assist. That tells it we want to use the Drawing Assist. So if I start to draw something, let's say like a circle up in this quadrant, it happens in all 8 quadrants. If I draw a line over and back and forth towards the center, it's creating a design. This is great for a radial design where you have a lot of symmetry and things are happening. There's a lot of tattooists who go through and create some designs this way, using different images and doing different things. It's very quick and easy to get something. Now, one thing I also maybe should mention about, drawing, painting with Procreate. If I draw a line, I'm going to make this a little bit thicker. Let's say I draw this line. Once I hold that, notice how it created the line. I can edit that line because I held my pen down until that popped up. I can turn it into an arc, and I can arc this. See how it's doing that to all of them at the same time. Let's say I like that. Once I'm happy, if I just tap on there, that's created. I can also create a shape. So if I do a circle and I hold this down, notice that it created a nice ellipse. I can play with that. I can make it more circular. One way to make it a circle is if I put one finger on here, or maybe it's 2 fingers. Maybe I have to do it earlier than this. But you can really kind of play around with this. Once I'm happy, I tap, it's done. It also will do that with, if you're trying to draw a square, you can edit that shape. You can pull this around till you get something that's maybe a little bit more square than what you started out with. So let's try one where I have one finger on here and try it. Maybe it's 2 fingers. They have to draw first before I release. Let's see if I draw a circle. Oh, I've got white, so you can't see it. I don't think I remember exactly what I'm supposed to do. Well, if somebody remembers, you can put it in comments or something like that, but lots of different things. This is actually quite helpful with, say, get rid of all this. Say I want to turn the drawing assist off and I just want to create a line. What this is usually going to do is, like, if you need to make a shape, let's say you had to make a pentagon and you wanted all your lines to be straight, but you got a jittery hand. See how if I hold my pen down on the back side of that line, I can kind of get that to go right where it needs to be. Then I draw another line. And if I hold, I can get those lines to go straight before I finish. We'll talk about other mechanics of brushes later, but this is how I would use, thinking about our second project. If I needed to define a shape and I wanted to paint inside that shape and make it very specific, now that I've got this shape, I can drag my color down, drop it in, and that's nicely filled. And now I have that shape and I can draw inside that, or I could erase out of it and turn it into, whatever it is I want it to be. Maybe I'm trying to make this look more like a maple leaf or something. I don't know, a house, a tree, a whatever. But by getting that shape nice and crisp early on, it makes the rest of the job a little bit easier. I don't know if we're going to really go through a lot of these adjustments. These adjustments, mostly I use the top one, hue, saturation, brightness. I might use curves. I might use Gaussian blur or motion blur. I don't really use many more of those. Liquify can be interesting. That 1 second from the bottom, if I hit liquify, I get all kinds of different ways to kind of push my image around. Let's say we wanted to push the edge. See how it starts to kind of, as I move my brush in towards the middle, it plays with the edge. You can swirl it. But that's kind of, I don't know, how would I say it? It starts to kind of play around with it. It has its use here and there, but you shouldn't like lean on a lot of this liquify stuff. Push is probably the most normal. Like if something's just a little bit off, but you want to kind of push it in a little bit on one area and kind of change how it looks a little bit, that might be a reason to use a liquify. Or you needed to stretch something out to make it a little bit bigger. But you notice how some of the stuff that happens, you probably can't even plan for. So you want to be careful. Then I think you just tap off of it. It's gone. Under the selection, most of the time, I'm not going to use like a rectangle or an ellipse. I'm going to use freehand selection rather than automatic. I don't like automatic. Some of the choices it makes are different. So any kind of shape that I can draw, and then I tap on the little dot where I started, now that's a selection. You'll notice that inside my area that I selected, there is no diagonal lines. So let's say I wanted to drop this color in inside my shape, I can do that and notice that it doesn't go outside of those lines. It might be a way to add a shape or something like that. The other thing that happens with this selection is you get areas, once you have a selection, you can add, you can remove parts of it. So let's say I wanted to draw this shape, and that's the shape I have. I can tick remove, and now I can do another little shape, and I can start to pull that out of my selection. I could invert, so then maybe we have the outside and not the inside. You know, if I drop the color in there, now we see where the selection was or where it is. The last one here, this is just like grabbing the whole image, that whatever's on that layer. So this selects that. You can do things here where you can freeform, you know, move it. So if I grab a corner, I can stretch it, I can pinch it, I can make it taller, I can make it shorter. Once I let go, it's going to crop it. So let's say I left it over here and I tap on that arrow. Now what I've done is that top right corner of this is gone. If I pull this back, there we go. We chopped off that little piece of that. So I'd have to undo to go back. 2-finger tap. You can do a uniform, move where you basically, this is going to keep the image the same size. It's not going to let me pinch it or stretch it. There's a distort. And then the one that you might end up using, that I use sometimes, is a warp. So here, anywhere where I put my pen and I can kind of push things around, I might push it in a little bit here or in a little bit there. It's changing the image that's on that layer. And I can change it a lot. But this is how you would maybe fit something onto, let's say, a shape in perspective. If I go back to right here, let's say I know that it goes back into perspective and I needed this corner to be in here and this corner to be down here, and I wanted that to be about the same, and kind of straighten out these lines. See how we can start to get that to sit maybe a little bit more like it looks like it's moving back into perspective. It looks like a floor. You can get an advanced mesh. You can flip things up and down, rotate them halfway. So those are just some different things. I haven't talked about any tools. That's the only other thing I think. I don't know that I think maybe we talked about it a little bit, but anytime you wanted to open a file, basically you can tap on a picture that's here, but if you want to create a completely new file, you'll hit the plus button. Sizes that I think are good, a 4K is a good one, but the bigger the file size, the less, layers you're allowed to have. So you have to kind of think about that as you get bigger and bigger. A4 is often one that I will use. And you can always kind of do your own kind. There's this little black box here with a plus sign on it. And if I tap in here, now what I can do is I can actually tell it how many pixels high by how many pixels wide. I can tell it the DPI, which is dots per inch or pixels per inch, and then it tells you how many layers you can have. I often am going to switch from pixels to inches because it makes a little bit more sense. Notice that it says that this file size is too large. You can't make something that's 5,000 inches by 33 or 3,000. So I would change it to, like, let's say I wanted my height to be 8.5 and I wanted my width to be 11. Now that's a sheet of paper at 3,000 pixel or 300 dots per inch. I can get 19 layers, and I just hit create. And here we are. Now I've got my thing. This is something that would print out well on a piece of copy paper, whatever image that I ended up drawing or creating. So like, that's why you would want to play around with how big it is. You can also go in and play around with some of the canvas stuff here. One other thing, if you haven't seen this before, if I opened a blank canvas like this and I wanted to put a photo into it, I'd say insert photo, and then I could pick something, you know, if I wanted to trace this drawing from the painting that I had made before, then I could do that. It's here. Once I'm happy, then I could take this layer, tap on the N or normal, and I can take the opacity down. Then if I want to draw on top of it, I hit plus on the layers, and now I'm drawing above it. And I usually try to change the blend mode from normal to multiply so I can see through it. Then I'd have like a darker color and, you know, pinch to zoom in, and I can start to trace this. Play around with what it looks like. These are just some like general Procreate ideas. They're not specific to the project itself. So that's quite a bit just to get started. Real quick, I'm going to go through and maybe let's try and just show you the next project. So I'm going to go in, I'll grab my folder. So let's say that you went through Blackboard to find it. And I go to digital painting. We're on exercise 2. So there's a couple different ones here. One is set up as a Photoshop document, that middle one there. The one on the right is the one that we just saved to this, so we could take it and open it. This one's saved as a flat image here. So this is the one from controlpaint.com. Now, the one thing that I'm not rushing through these projects. So some of you have already done this one. You've already started the next one. I am probably going to add a couple other bonus choices to these, just because I eliminated a couple that you probably didn't even see. But one thing that I don't agree with about this, let's take this and I'm going to just hold my finger on the image and I'm going to save it. I'm going to say, okay. Then I'll go back out. I'll get onto Procreate. I'm going to go to my gallery. I'm going to hit photo and I'm going to tap on that image I just saved. And now I have this. This is my file. This is my background or my layer 1. I don't want to paint on that. I want to paint above it. The one thing that I would say that's kind of tricky, let's go through and like, I'm going to hold my finger above this color and sample it. So let's see what family it's saying. It's saying that this color is in the red family. Let's sample a different one and see if it has the same family. It does. It's saying that most of these colors are related to a red underneath. The one thing that I will say is as I look at this, yeah, we're on a different one. These colors and values in here, some of them I think are too similar. Once you start to build this up, and if you watch the videos, you're going to see some of these end up being super similar. And I would rather not go through and have you paint all of them the same. Once you start to get to a finish on this, and you go through and actually make some of the different colors or the values, I want you to also be okay with maybe changing it a little bit. Maybe you're going to change it to a slightly lighter gray or a slightly darker gray, because as I look at this, there's probably some of these that can get a little lighter and can get a little darker. So since we're in Procreate and we're just kind of start to go through this, let's talk about what you're supposed to do for this project really quick. So you can kind of pick your brush or which one you want to use for this. I would be into the airbrushing zone, and I would go with probably, let's go medium hard blend. Okay, so I'm going to sample my color first. So this is the white that shape right there. I'm on a layer above the actual template. I mean, we could go through here and rename this. Let's call this the base. Maybe this is paint number 1. Okay, so I'm going to paint on this layer first. You want to look at your size of your brush. We don't want to paint too small. So one thing that I notice about some of you, you have a very small brush size and you're going like this, 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 this. This is taking a long time to try and get that shape. And even then, you might not have the shape right. So I'm going to undo all that. If I have a bigger shape, I can even go like this, and I paint the whole thing in one quick thing. Now, that doesn't allow me to see where the edges are, but if I tap on my layers panel and I change it from normal to multiply, just for this moment, I'm doing that. See how I can see through the paint? It's turned my white paint into gray because it's multiplying on top of the other layer. Now, if I switch over to my eraser, and let's also go in the airbrush section, and let's get a hard, small airbrush, okay, for our eraser. And what it's asking you to do now, you can kind of decide how big it is, but now I can start to erase along that edge and see how nice and clean that is. A hard airbrush will make this easy. So that's one way. I'm kind of got it a little bit small. I could make this bigger. And here's one other thing I can do. I can click and drag my eraser and see how it says line created. I can edit that shape and I can pull my eraser so it matches up with that edge as best as possible, right? And now I'm happy with that edge. That top edge is super clean. Then I can just by hand erase the rest of this and get rid of it. Do the same thing here. Click and drag across, hold it till it says line created, edit shape, pull it down so that it matches up almost perfectly with that line. Once I'm happy with it, tap away, and I can erase what's outside of there. So we can kind of start to see, how did that look? I can try to do this by hand as well. I don't have to just do a click drag and hold it. So let's see how we did if we go back to our layer and change it from multiply back to normal. We tap it. We can see how we did. It looks pretty good, but there's definitely some mistakes here. I could go back to my brush and I could do the same thing that I was doing with the eraser. I'm too big. And I can kind of clean up those edges. Then I can always go through and erase those again. So what this project is about is trying to get a shape, a certain value, and to try and get the edges nice. And you're trying to get the edges nice, not through creating a selection, but by painting and erasing. So we're going to use a lot of our brush tool and our eraser tool to try and get this to look as good as we can make it. Okay, so once I'm happy with that, what I can do is zoom out and I can pick a different area to paint. What he has you do, if you watch his video, is he's not going to paint right here. Whoop, I'm on eraser. Right here next, or right here. He's going to skip over and let's say get this color over here and start to paint in a different zone. You know, again, I would do a little bit bigger of a brush. You know, that's nice and easy to see. It's nice and covered. Then I'll go back, change this to multiply. This time my gray is even darker. Then I'll get my small eraser. I can zoom in and try to erase right up to that line. Or I can click and drag it and see how that cleans up that edge. And if I'm having a hard time, I can just kind of do it with the hold or even edit the shape to get, oops, exactly where I want it. And I tap off and I can clean up whatever is outside of that. You know, that's a little too far. Double tap, undo, try again. There we go. Is it perfect? No, but then I change this layer back into normal and it will show me what it looks like. Normal is just like an opaque paint. Wherever you put opaque paint down, you can see that. So then maybe I would go down here and do this one. Same thing. Paint it in, nice and bold, nice and dark. Change this over to multiply. Get my eraser. Zoom in so I can kind of clean this up a little bit easier. You know, I might even rotate this so I can erase at a better angle. And again, I could do the click and drag. I didn't do it that time. Edit shape. That fixed that little bit right there. Tap off of it. You can kind of go back and forth, but the skill that you're trying to learn is being able to control a shape through painting and erasing. This one is not about using your selection tool. Okay. Selection tool would be easy if we were doing that. You know, basically you take it here, you can just tap in one corner, tap the next corner, tap the next corner, tap the next corner, tap over here, tap it up there, and you've got your shape. Then you go to the brush tool, you sample the color, and you can just go boop, drop it in. But you're not learning anything. You're making it easy, but you're not practicing the skill that we're focusing on, which is painting and then controlling the shape through erasing. So that's kind of the difference between the color mix and then this one is we're trying to learn something a little bit different. If you watch his video, so like this is all on one layer, what he will go through and do is add another layer, right? So this layer, and then he'll take this layer and put it up. Take it, I'm going to drag it underneath paint layer 1. All right. And so then he might do this color here. And one thing that's kind of like to your advantage is I can paint underneath layer and look at that. It goes underneath those other guys. It didn't do anything to affect those. So what I can do is turn this into multiply and then start erasing this away. So there's a bunch that's like underneath this guy. But that's how I'm getting my edges here, right? Turn this back into a normal layer. And so now that looks like a really nicely painted edge. Now this one, he doesn't have a color for it, but I would almost take this and maybe go just a little bit lighter than what he has there. So this is where I would start to say playing our own game and starting to pick our own colors might be to our advantage, our own values. Change this back to multiply, grab my eraser tool, make it just a little bit bigger. Go back, make this normal. Okay, and notice that I'm picking different spots that are not touching each other so that I can kind of continue to build that up. So one thing that you can notice is if I turn off paint layer 1 where I was very specific about those edges, look at my second paint layer. Some of it is not even in the right place. You know, I could go through and clean a little bit of this up, but I really don't have to. It can stay messy and underneath those other layers because they're on top. They hide that. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where you have them all. But one thing that happens is a lot of these ones, or actually, let's do this one down here. We'll paint this guy. I think we're on the right layer. We are. Look at how similar this is to that other one. I think that, let's sample this here. This color, and then this one. Oh, that's not showing up because it's underneath. They're just not the same. Like they look too much the same is what I mean to say. So I would almost say, let's sample this color, and then we look at it. Let's take it and just make it a hair lighter. Now, if I paint this and we put it next to each other, see how much better that looks than what he's given us? It's just a little bit off. So then I'll change it to multiply, get my eraser, clean up those edges. I might edit the shape specifically, especially if I'm on like a, you know, a bottom edge that I want it to be really clean. I want it to look nice. I might play around with it a little bit more like that. Take that, change it back to normal. And really quick, see how we went through and we've gone through. We're doing our eraser thing. We're doing our added paint thing. We've got quite a few of these. And then we can kind of change them as we go through. So the one other thing that this doesn't do is it starts to kind of get to a certain point where, you know, you have some different edges and they might look a little bit different in between. So we might even go at the end, and he does this, and I would recommend this to you as well. You might go through and add like a detail layer at the top where you maybe get some textures or something like that. But let's say we have these two edges right here, these two guys, and we want a clean edge in between those two. We could paint that with a nice straight line. Let's maybe take this color and then we'll make it just slightly lighter. Okay. And we're going to get a nice small airbrush here. We want a teeny line. I'm going to drag it pretty small. And I'll start at one corner and I'll go to the other. I'm going to hold it so that it snaps, and I'll edit and I can kind of move it. Something like that. If I zoom out, see how that made that line look nice, and like maybe there's a little bit of light catching it. So that's maybe a little too light. We could also take this and maybe take its opacity down just a little bit, and that would soften it. Kind of make it blend into what's underneath. You know, we could do something similar in here as well. You know, maybe this has a darker edge, so we go just a little bit darker. We paint a line right there, hold it, maybe edit the shape so we can get it right where we want it. Oh, moved it. And see how that cleaned up those lines on those overlaps. So that's kind of the idea of what we're doing. I'm going to do a little bit of it in Photoshop as well, really quick before we end as well. But this is the second project. I'm going to switch cameras and go to a different camera. I'm going to be done with the iPad for now. Maybe I'll go over really quick one more time just to show you again. If I wanted to save this and send it to Mr. Kimball, I'm in this file. I hit the wrench, I hit share, and I'm going to hit PSD, Photoshop document. Then if I want to drop it into my drive, I tap it there. I can rename it. We'll call this Kimball Dome. I think I want to put Procreate demo. Okay. If I like the name of that, I want to make sure it's in the right folder. So I got to find my folder, digital painting, exercise 2, value dome, save here, upload. I hit PSD for Photoshop document. So if we go back and we look at that folder, there it is, Kimball Dome Procreate demo. Now you could see that if you wanted to, if you go through the thing. So you can see these demos and we can kind of take them apart. We can play with them.